We're now going to start the penultimate session for this conference, and we're going to be talking about the very important but also very sticky issue, which is financing. You know, we all know that investing in eliminating hunger and malnutrition could lead to massive economic gains, but we've also heard that there are constant insufficient funds to actually meet the SDG 2 by 2030. What can be done? What needs to be done? We've got two keynote speakers before we start the plenary session, the panel discussion, sorry. The first speaker is Dr. Harold Alderman, who is the Senior Research Fellow in the Poverty, Health, and Nutrition Division at IFPRI. Dr. Alderman?
Everybody here is passionate about nutrition. You wouldn't be here on Friday afternoon if you weren't. But when we want to go to the minister and say, we need more allocation, there are people who are passionate about education. There are people passionate about roads. There are people passionate about whatever their field is. And the question I'm going to address is, how do we put the information that we know about nutrition onto the minister's desk? How do we show them that nutrition is not something you give to the poor because they missed out on development, but it's actually something that makes development happen? Now that's been something that has been studied for years. We have better data now, so we can go further on that. But what I want to do is to show, no matter what you do, you're going to have to make assumptions. You're going to say, well, that study's based on 2 villages in Guatemala, or it's based on 200 children in Jamaica. People are going to always criticize the assumptions. What I want to show briefly is it doesn't matter. You can vary the assumptions. You can do a number of different approaches. They all come to the same story, the same bottom line. Now, so the evidence is very strong. The people who won't change their mind no matter what evidence you present them, I'm sorry, I can't address that. It's a bigger question than we have time for. Okay, so what different methods do they have? One that I am particularly find useful is just the benefit cost analysis, where you look at the small project and you look at the cost. That's very useful between different interventions within the sector. It's not what you can usually use to put nutrition as a line item in the Ministry of Finance. It's much more for project level. Another way that's done, and has been done in many places, where you take the current population, you can see the people who are taller have better jobs, are earning more. This has been shown in a number of studies. For example, Latin America has done a set of studies and have found that the returns can be maybe 10% of GNP. Similar studies, the African Union has done a set of studies, again, showing how much of the current economy had lost out because they hadn't addressed nutrition a while ago. That shows the magnitude of the problem, but it's looking backwards. You can take the same thing and look forward. You can look at the number of children who are malnourished now and say, if we hadn't solved this problem in the future, we're going to have a loss of GNP. That's one way of looking at the problem, that because there's less malnourished now than there were 20 years ago, the studies that have been done in Africa or Latin America do show that the share of GNP that you're missing is less than the other ways of approaching it. So those methods have been done. They all come to large numbers. Now, there's other ways that have been done where you also want to look at the costs. And that has been done. The Lancet had a paper on what it costs to scale up. The World Bank has done the same thing. That put together with the gains from reducing stunting, that obviously can give you a benefit cost ratio. I'm going to go over some of those numbers in just a second. Okay, so going one step further, can we get this projected using randomized controlled trials, using data that's followed children for a long time. And there's one study that John Hodnott has done. One more slide, I guess. John Hodnott has done with colleagues using the Guatemala trial that was done a generation ago, and seeing that the children in that group have more consumption, more earning. They've then taken and extrapolated that to globally. And one thing, I think this is very important for the topic that we have here, it turns out that the returns as a share of GNP, and we're talking about very large numbers, I'll give you an example in just a second, is higher for middle-income countries and fast-growing countries. So the returns to investing in nutrition is not something that is only there for the low-income countries that are trying to solve the large problems of poverty. The returns are actually higher on economies growing because productivity, schooling increases, and when you have a fast-growing economy, the schooling returns are higher than if the economy is stagnant. But I've taken that same approach that John Hodnott and colleagues did, using data from Zimbabwe, a different data set. And turns out that the numbers are very similar. Okay, we're not having one example, one country, we have two countries. People say, well, that still isn't convincing. You're trying to extrapolate globally on the basis of one or two samples. So what I've done is, first of all, I'll give you these results, and then I'm going to say that I varied these assumptions, the opposite of cherry picking. What I've done is said, that assumption's high, I'm going to cut it in half. And I've done that a few things. But for India, I gave the example, for South Asia in general, using the approach similar, as I said, based on the relationship of undernutrition and schooling 20 years later following the same children, or now adults, taking that and extrapolating it to all of South Asia, I find that there's nearly a total benefit of, and this is a staggering number, 350 billion. Why is that number so large? Because you're getting more productivity for somebody over their entire lifetime, 40 years of working, because they've had more schooling, or they have they learn more per year of school. And using discount rates and using the cost of this, a benefit-cost ratio of 26:1. I would hope most ministers of finance would look at that and say, hey, we can use that. But, okay, going further, I was using that number was based on the trend in South Asia. If you accelerate that trend to reach some of the goals that we're talking about here, that number goes up to $500 billion using the same approach. But again, what I'm here to try to discuss is that all these assumptions, people rightfully are going to say, well, man, I'm not sure about that assumption. Where did it come from, and so forth. So I've played around with this. First of all, I said, if you're going to get more people in school, you're going to have to pay more, so the cost to the government is going to go up. That brings the benefit-cost ratio down a trifle. I'm also saying you got more people in school, the returns to schooling may go down. Usually people say 5, 6, 7% the returns to schooling. That's in the literature now. Every year of schooling increases your earning by that much. Let's cut it in half, because the economy may get saturated. And what happens, and I've taken other assumptions. Well, let's not use the Zimbabwe study. Let's not use the Guatemala study. Let's take another study by Horton and Steckel and cut their parameter in half. Basically, I'm taking every number that I've been able to use for these type of studies and said, okay, that's really too big, I'm going to cut in half. And it doesn't matter. Your benefit-cost ratios, when you're doing it, are still large. One way of looking at it, there's a apocryphal, I think, a story about the communities in the rainforest that has a counting system. 1, 2, 3, many. Once you go to many, that's as high as you go. Basically, the same thing on the rates of return to nutrition. We only need to know that it's high. It really doesn't need to know whether the benefit-cost ratio is 15 to 1 or 12 to 1. All we know is it's a very high number. And as I said, any study, any approach that you can do plausible should give you similar results that the ones I've shown. There'll be others. There are many out there. They all give the same story using different approaches. At some point we say, hey, they're probably getting close to whatever that extrapolation for the world economy is going to be. It's a large number. Thank you.